June 3, 1993. West Memphis Police Station. Fluorescent lights buzzing over 3 metal tables in 3 separate rooms. Damien Echols, 18 years old, black clothes wrinkled from 26 hours without sleep, staring at crime scene photos he can't unsee. 3 8-year-old boys pulled from a drainage ditch, hogtied with their own shoelaces. Detective Bryn Ridge leans forward. "You into devil worship, Damien?" Down the hall, Jessie Misskelley Jr, 17, IQ of 72, is confessing to something he didn't witness. Jason Baldwin, 16, honor roll student, wondering why his Metallica shirt matters more than his alibi. The black shoelace from Damien's boot. Collected, logged, photographed. By midnight, all 3 charged with capital murder. West Memphis population, 28,000. Murder rate before this, nearly 0. What vanished that night wasn't freedom. It was any chance the truth about Robin Hood Hills would ever matter. West Memphis, spring 1993. Bible Belt crossroads 90 minutes from Memphis, where the Mississippi River bends and everyone knows everyone's business. May 5th started ordinary. Kids riding bikes after school. Parents expecting them home by dinner. By 6 p.m., 3 families were calling neighbors. By midnight, search parties were forming. Dawn brought the worst news imaginable. Christopher Byers, Michael Moore, Stevie Branch, 8 years old, found in a drainage ditch in Robin Hood Hills, a 15-acre stretch of woods and water where kids went to play and parents told them not to. The details hit the police like a sledgehammer. Hogtied, submerged. Their own shoelaces binding them in knots too complex for children to tie. Within 48 hours, West Memphis police, 0 homicide experience, 0 forensic training, were facing national media trucks and a community demanding someone pay. The pressure to solve this wasn't just professional, it was existential. Small towns don't survive this kind of horror without answers. Fast answers. And Gary Gitchell, police chief for 6 years without a single murder case, needed a suspect before the town tore itself apart. He already had one in mind. Damien Echols was on the police radar before the bodies were even found. Not because of evidence, because of reputation, the weird kid. Black clothes every day, even in Arkansas heat. Read tarot cards at the laundromat. Talked about Wicca and Aleister Crowley to anyone who'd listen. In West Memphis, 1993, that made you interesting to exactly 2 groups, teenage outcasts and police keeping informal watch lists. Detective Don Bray had a notebook. Damien, black clothes, Stephen King, rumors of animal sacrifice. None of it true, all of it written down. When the murders happened, Bray's first thought wasn't evidence, it was profile. The satanic panic was everywhere that year. Talk shows, news specials, church sermons about teenagers in black performing rituals in the woods. The case built itself in Bray's mind before he'd examined a single shoelace. By May 7th, 2 days after the bodies were discovered, Damien's name was circulating as the primary suspect. No forensics, no witness, just a town that needed its monster to look the part. And Damien Echols, foster care kid with a history of psychiatric treatment and a taste for the occult, looked exactly right. Sometimes the answer is who people want it to be, not who it actually is. Jason Baldwin was Damien's best friend. 16, honor student, played guitar, wore Metallica shirts, kept to himself. In any other town, invisible. In West Memphis during a satanic panic, suspicious. Jessie Misskelley was different. Learning disability, IQ of 72, worked odd jobs, hung around the older kids sometimes, but wasn't really part of their circle. 3 names. 3 teenagers who wore black and listened to heavy metal in a town where that was enough. The investigation didn't follow evidence to suspects. It followed suspicion to evidence. On June 3rd, police brought Jessie in for questioning. 12 hours, alone, no parent, no lawyer. Just 2 detectives and a tape recorder they turned on for 46 minutes of a 12-hour interrogation. They told him he could go home if he told them what happened. They told him they knew Damien did it. They told him he was there. They told him what to say. And Jessie, exhausted and confused and desperate to leave, said it. The confession was a disaster. Timeline wrong. Claimed the murders happened at noon when school records proved all 3 victims alive until 6 p.m. Location wrong. Method wrong. But it named Damien and Jason, and that was enough. In West Memphis, being different was the same as being guilty. Brent Davis and John Fogelman led the prosecution, both religious conservatives, both facing election year pressure in a county that wanted blood for blood. Their evidence inventory was striking in what it contained and what it didn't. Contained: Jessie's confession, Damien's journals filled with dark poetry and occult symbols, cassette tapes of Metallica and Slayer, paperback copies of Stephen King novels. Didn't contain DNA matching the defendants, a murder weapon, blood evidence on their clothes, eyewitness testimony, or any physical proof they'd been in Robin Hood Hills that day. The shoelaces became everything. FBI analysis came back. Knots consistent with common bindings taught in Boy Scouts and other youth organizations, no unusual or ritualistic pattern identified. The prosecution buried that report. In court, they presented the shoelaces as proof of occult ritual binding. Defense attorney Paul Ford was drowning. First capital case. $9,000 budget against unlimited state resources. 500 exhibits to review. No money for expert witnesses. He did what he could. It wasn't enough. When evidence doesn't exist, symbolism becomes the prosecution's best weapon. The trial strategy wasn't subtle. Prosecutor Fogelman opened with Satan, not metaphorically, literally. His case rested on convincing a jury that 3 8-year-olds were sacrificed in a devil-worshipping ritual by 3 teenagers who wore black and read horror novels. Enter Dale Griffiths, self-proclaimed occult expert. Mail order, Ph.D., never examined the crime scene, never interviewed the defendants, never reviewed the forensic evidence. His testimony: Damien's interest in Wicca equals devil worship equals child sacrifice. The progression was absurd. It worked, exhibit after exhibit. Metallica lyrics projected on courtroom screens. Horror novels passed to jurors. Pentagrams drawn in Damien's notebooks. Teenage doodles presented as evidence of demonic intent. The defense couldn't afford counter-experts. The jury, 12 people from Jonesboro, conservative, religious, already saturated with media coverage portraying the defendants as satanic killers, heard what they expected to hear. The shoelace appeared 14 times during trial. 0 forensic analysis supported the ritual claim. But forensics don't matter when you're selling a story. And this story, small-town kids corrupted by evil music and dark books, was one the jury already believed. The prosecution sold a story, not evidence. And stories are what juries remember. What the jury never saw could have changed everything. DNA evidence excluded all 3 defendants. A bloody knife found in the lake behind Jason's trailer, tested, not a match, never mentioned in court. Hair fibers recovered from one victim's body, didn't match any defendant. Bite marks on Christopher Byers. Forensic odontologist examined Damien's, Jason's, and Jessie's teeth, found no match. Defense filed motions to present this evidence. Judge David Burnett denied everyone. Meanwhile, alternative suspects went uninvestigated. John Mark Byers, Christopher's stepfather, history of domestic violence, erratic behavior, failed polygraph. Police noted it, moved on. Terry Hobbs, Stevie Branch's stepfather, last known adult to see the 3 boys alive, refused multiple requests for interviews, never fully cooperated with the investigation. Detective Bray's notes mention Hobbs twice, then nothing. Years later, witnesses would come forward claiming they saw Hobbs with the victims hours before the murders. In 1994, none of that mattered. The case was built. The suspects were selected. The evidence that didn't fit was simply ignored. Justice wasn't about finding the truth. It was about closing the case. March 19, 1994. The verdict came after 9 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts, capital murder ×3. The courtroom erupted. Families of the victims wept, some in relief, some in confusion. Damien showed nothing. The sentencing phase began immediately. Prosecution argued for death. Defense begged for mercy. The jury took 4 hours, death by lethal injection. Damien Echols, 18 years old, sentenced to die for murders the evidence said he didn't commit. Jason Baldwin's trial came next. Separate proceedings, same outcome, life without parole. Jessie Misskelley tried months later after his confession made him legally separate from the others. Life plus 40 years. The black shoelace was tagged, photographed, sealed in an evidence bag, and stored in the Craighead County Courthouse basement where it would sit for the next 18 years. Some victim families believed justice was served. Others weren't convinced. The defendants maintained their innocence. None of it mattered. 3 teenagers were sentenced to die for wearing black clothes and listening to heavy metal. The case was closed. 2 years passed, Damien on death row at Varner Unit Supermax. Jason at Varner Unit Medium Security, Jessie at East Arkansas Regional Unit. Then, in 1996, HBO released something that changed everything. Paradise Lost, The Child Murders at Robin Hood Hills. Filmmakers Joe Berlinger and Bruce Sinofsky had access the jury never did. They showed the coerced confession, the lack of physical evidence, the satanic panic testimony, the prosecutorial misconduct. The national audience saw what Jonesboro jurors hadn't. Reasonable doubt stacked so high, it blotted out the sun. Celebrity support followed fast. Eddie Vedder watched the documentary, wrote a song called Army Reserve about the case. Metallica, whose music was used as evidence of evil, publicly supported the defendants. Natalie Maines spoke out. Henry Rollins spoke out. Then Johnny Depp got involved, not just as a supporter, but as an active investigator, funding legal research and forensic reviews. Online advocacy exploded. Free the West Memphis 3 became a movement. Supporters called them the WM3, wrongfully convicted, innocent. The world was watching. Finally, by 2007, defense attorneys had new ammunition, advanced DNA testing unavailable in 1993. They filed motions. Arkansas granted it. The results came back definitive. No DNA from Damien, Jason, or Jessie on any of the 3 victims. None. But there was DNA. A hair clutched in young Stevie Branch's hand. Tested. Matched to Terry Hobbs, Stevie's stepfather. The shoelaces were tested again. No match to the defendants. Defense filed for a new trial. The evidence that convicted them never existed. The evidence that could free them was now confirmed. Arkansas Supreme Court reviewed the petition and denied it. Their reasoning: absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. New DNA doesn't prove innocence, just lack of presence. The legal standard was impossible. Prove you didn't do it. Prove a negative. Defense attorneys prepared for a federal habeas corpus appeal. That process could take another decade. Damien had already served 13 years on death row. He was running out of time. The evidence that convicted them never existed. The evidence that could free them was ignored. August 2011. After 18 years, Arkansas offered a deal. Not exoneration. Not a new trial. An offered plea. A legal maneuver that lets defendants plead guilty while maintaining innocence. The terms guilty plea, time served, immediate release. The catch: no lawsuit against the state, no compensation for wrongful imprisonment, and guilty stamped on their records forever. Damien faced an impossible choice. Stay on death row, keep fighting for full exoneration, possibly die before vindication. Or take the deal, walk free, live with a guilty plea attached to his name. Jason Baldwin refused. "I won't plead guilty to something I didn't do. I won't give them that." Damien, who'd spent half his incarceration in solitary confinement, 23 hours a day in a cell designed to break minds, made the call. "We can fight from outside. I can't survive another year in here." Jason listened. Agreed. August 19th, 2011, all three accepted the Alford plea. Released after 6,585 days imprisoned. Judge David Burnett, now a state senator, presided. The shoelace stayed in the evidence locker. Case closed, never solved. Freedom with an asterisk, innocence without exoneration. Damien walked out and married Laurie Davis, the woman who'd written him letters for 18 years, visited him in prison, organized rallies, fought alongside Johnny Depp and the legal team. They'd met through letters. She saw his face in the documentary. Started writing. Never stopped. Jason struggled. PTSD from prison, nightmares about guards, difficulty trusting anyone. He worked as a mechanic, avoided cameras, tried to build something normal from nothing. Jessie disappeared from public view almost immediately, lived quietly, battled demons from the false confession that haunted him. The Alford plea barred all three from suing Arkansas for wrongful imprisonment. No compensation, no formal apology, just freedom with conditions. Meanwhile, evidence kept emerging. Witnesses came forward claiming they'd seen Terry Hobbs with the three victims hours before their deaths. Hobbs sued Natalie Maines for defamation after she publicly named him as a suspect. The lawsuit was dismissed. West Memphis Police refused to reopen the investigation. The real killer, if it wasn't the WM3, was never pursued. They're free, but the truth is still buried. The case never left the public eye. Paradise Lost became a trilogy. West of Memphis, a feature documentary produced by Peter Jackson and Damien himself, was released in 2012. Devil's Knot, a dramatization starring Reese Witherspoon and Colin Firth, followed in 2013. Forensic science programs began teaching the West Memphis 3 case as a textbook example of wrongful conviction. How coerced confessions work, how satanic panic overrides evidence, how juries convict based on fear rather than facts. Damien wrote books, Life After Death, a memoir about his years on death row. He speaks at universities, conferences, criminal justice reform panels. Jason became an advocate, working with the Innocence Project and other organizations fighting wrongful convictions. Jessie stays off-grid, rarely speaks publicly, carries the weight of his false confession like a stone. 3 boys' murders remain officially unsolved. Christopher Byers, Michael Moore, Stevie Branch. They're footnotes now in a story that became about something else entirely. Justice for 3 teenagers, but not for 3 murdered children. The black shoelace sits in the Craigshead County Evidence Room, case file number 93-05-0666, physical artifact of a case built on fear instead of facts. Symbol of how a town's panic became 3 teenagers' death sentences. The knots were ordinary, taught in Boy Scouts. Nothing ritualistic about them. The FBI report saying exactly that was buried for 18 years. Finally released as public record after the Alford plea. West Memphis remains divided. Some believe justice was served, that the WM3 got away with murder through celebrity intervention. Others see it clearly. 3 innocent men lost their youth to a witch hunt. Damien, Jason, and Jessie are in their 40s now. They live with guilty but innocent permanently stamped on their names. Terry Hobbs has never been charged. The investigation has never been reopened. The truth about what happened in Robin Hood Hills on May 5, 1993, remains buried under 18 years of lies, pressure, and a town that needed someone to blame. A black shoelace found knotted around a tree branch. Ordinary. Simple. Standard evidence in a child murder case. Except to a town that needed it to mean something darker. The knot became a ritual. The shoelace became proof of evil. And 3 teenagers became monsters because they wore black and read Stephen King. The FBI said it was ordinary from the beginning. Nobody wanted to hear it, not the police under pressure to solve an unsolvable case, not the prosecutors facing election years and national media, not the jury that wanted to believe evil had a face and that face looked like Damien Echols. The shoelace told the truth all along. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't what someone did. It's what we're willing to believe they did just so we can sleep at night.